When my father, a retired three-star general, passed away, I thought the hardest part would be facing the grief. I was dead wrong. At his memorial service, as I stood surrounded by high-ranking officers, my father's lifelong attorney leaned in close, gripped my shoulder, and whispered words that chilled me to the bone. "Don't tell your husband and don't tell your stepmother. Come to my office right away. You could be in danger." When I arrived at his office 2 hours later and saw who was standing right at the door waiting for me, I froze. My heart dropped into my stomach as the entire reality of my 12-year marriage began to unravel right before my eyes. Follow my story until the end to see how far my father went to protect me, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my voice has reached. My name is Rebecca Carter, and at 34 years old, I thought I understood the men in my life. Growing up as the only daughter of General Richard Carter, a formidable three-star military leader, meant my childhood was defined by discipline, ironclad loyalty, and an unshakable sense of security. My father was a towering presence who spent his career protecting his country, but his absolute priority was always protecting me. When I married Mark 12 years ago, my father had his reservations, but he kept them quiet for my sake. Mark was a charming, ambitious financial consultant who seemed to worship the ground I walked on. Over time, however, his initial warmth subtly shifted into cold, calculating control. He slowly took over our joint accounts, questioned every purchase I made, and subtly isolated me from my father's inner circle, all while masking it as protective love. Compounding the distance was Evelyn, my father's second wife. After my mother passed, Evelyn stepped into my father's life with a quiet, polite demeanor that expertly hid her sharp edges. She always played the gentle, soft-spoken victim in family matters, yet she masterfully managed to push me to the margins of my father's life. For over a decade, I navigated a fragile marriage and a tense family dynamic, completely blind to the fact that the two people I trusted most were slowly surrounding me. The fragile stability of my world shattered on a rainy Tuesday morning when my father unexpectedly suffered a massive heart attack. At just 68 years old, General Richard Carter was gone. The news left me utterly broken, anchored only by the overwhelming weight of my grief. But amid the fog of my sorrow, I began to notice a chilling shift in the people around me. Instead of offering comfort, Mark and Evelyn immediately went to work. Within 48 hours of my father's death, I caught them holding hushed, intense conversations in corners of the house. They stopped whispering whenever I walked into the room, their eyes darting nervously. They started asking me precise, probing questions about bank routing numbers, military pension structures, and where my father kept the original trust deeds for his properties. Their cold detachment felt unnatural, almost transactional. The turning point came at the post-funeral reception. As I stood near the mantel, exhausted and surrounded by high-ranking military officers paying their respects, my father's lifelong attorney, Arthur Vance, stepped beside me. Arthur was a stoic man who had managed my father's legal affairs for 30 years. He leaned in close, his fingers gripping my shoulder with a fierce intensity, and whispered words that chilled me to the bone. "Don't tell your husband and don't tell your stepmother. Come to my office right away. You could be in danger." "Excuse me for a moment," I lied to Mark, pressing my hand against my forehead and pretending to have a debilitating migraine. I told him I was driving to the pharmacy for medication and needed to be alone. The moment I pulled out of the driveway, my hands began to tremble on the steering wheel. I drove straight through downtown, my heart hammering against my ribs, until I reached the familiar glass tower where Arthur Vance's practice was located. I took the elevator up to the 9th floor, the hallway deathly quiet outside of business hours. But as I turned the corner toward Arthur's door, I froze. Standing right at the entrance, waiting in the dim light, was a tall, sharp-eyed man in a dark coat holding a thick leather binder. I recognized him immediately from my father's official retirement gala. He was James Miller, a former military investigator turned private detective. Seeing him there sent a wave of icy panic through my chest. Arthur opened the door, motioning both of us inside before locking it firmly behind us and drawing the blinds. "Rebecca, take a seat," Arthur said, his voice grave. He didn't waste a second. "What I am about to show you will be painful, but you need to listen carefully." James set the leather binder on the mahogany desk and opened it, revealing dozens of bank statements, property records, and surveillance photos. "Mark and Evelyn aren't enemies, Rebecca," Arthur said softly. "They've been quietly collaborating behind your back for over 3 years. They are working together to strip you of your father's estate and leave you with nothing." James opened the binder to reveal a paper trail of complete betrayal. My husband, Mark, was drowning in nearly $2 million of debt from failed, illegal offshore investments. Evelyn, desperate to maintain her lavish lifestyle after my father's death, had struck a deal with Mark. She was secretly funneling money from my father's secondary accounts to appease Mark's creditors. In exchange, Mark promised to help her secure complete control over the rest of the estate once my father passed. "Your father wasn't blind, Rebecca," Arthur explained, pushing a set of certified military trust documents toward me. "6 months ago, he discovered their secret transfers. A lesser man would have confronted them immediately, but your father was a strategist. He knew if he confronted them then, they would simply alter their tactics or drag you into a long, messy legal battle. Instead, General Carter launched a brilliant countermove. He quietly restructured his entire fortune, over $6.2 million in properties, military investments, and liquid assets, placing everything into an irrevocable military trust. The terms were absolute. I was the sole beneficiary, but the trust would activate only if I severed ties with Mark and cut Evelyn out entirely. To keep them completely off balance, my father placed a fake, unupdated draft of a will in his home office safe, a draft that left everything to Evelyn and Mark. He laid a trap, waiting for them to walk right into it. Armed with the truth about my father's master plan, I drove home with a cold, steady resolve replacing my panic. For 12 years, Mark had treated me like a naive trophy wife who couldn't comprehend basic finances. It was time to use his own arrogance against him. I walked through the front door, let my eyes swell with artificial tears, and collapsed onto the sofa, pretending to be utterly consumed by grief and a severe migraine. Within minutes, Mark and Evelyn were hovering over me. They exchanged a quick, triumphant glance over my head before Mark sat beside me, rubbing my back with synthetic warmth. "Rebecca, honey," Mark said softly, his voice dripping with fake concern. "Evelyn and I were talking. To save you from the burden of handling Dad's complicated affairs while you mourn, we had our attorney draft some routine estate transfer papers. We just need your signature to streamline everything." Evelyn slid a thick stack of documents across the coffee table, the very papers designed to sign away my rights to my father's primary estate. I forced myself to look frail and overwhelmed, nodding meekly. "I can't even read these right now," I whispered, wiping away a fake tear. "Let's just sign everything officially at the attorney's office on Friday." Mark's eyes practically gleamed with greed. Later that evening, I watched from the hallway shadow as they toasted champagne glasses in the kitchen, utterly convinced their trap had sprung, unaware that I was the one pulling the trigger. Friday morning arrived, cold and overcast. We gathered in the high-end, glass-walled conference room of Mark's corporate attorney, a sharp-looking man who smiled at me with practiced condescension. Mark sat beside me, holding my hand with a firm, controlling grip, while Evelyn adjusted her designer jacket, exuding quiet confidence. They truly believed they were about to execute the final step of their multi-million-dollar theft. "Mrs. Carter," Mark's attorney began, sliding the fake will from my father's safe across the table. "Under the terms of this document, you will formally relinquish administrative rights to your stepmother, Evelyn, and surrender all estate claims to your husband's asset management firm. We just need your final signature." I sat entirely still, making eye contact with neither of them, until the conference room door swung open. Arthur Vance walked in, accompanied by James Miller, carrying a thick leather dossier. "That document is null, void, and fraudulent," Arthur announced loudly. Mark leapt to his feet, his face twisting in anger. "What is the meaning of this? Get out!" But Arthur ignored him, slapping the certified 100-page military trust dossier onto the table, alongside audio recordings of Mark and Evelyn plotting their scheme. As Arthur read the terms of the real, irrevocable trust and explained that attempting to enforce the fake will trigger immediate federal wire fraud and grand larceny charges, the color drained from their faces. Mark's lawyer turned pale, shoved his papers into his briefcase, and walked out without saying a word. The aftermath was swift and devastating for both of them. Faced with overwhelming digital and financial evidence, Mark's firm fired him immediately, and federal authorities launched a full investigation into his offshore wire fraud. To avoid state prison time, Mark surrendered every asset he owned and signed an unconditional divorce agreement. Evelyn, stripped of her allowance and facing complete financial ruin, was forced to sign a total waiver of claims before vacating my father's home with nothing to her name. With the legal battle over, I secured my full $6.2 million inheritance and officially dropped Mark's last name. I sold the main house, packed my life into a few boxes, and moved to a serene coastal town overlooking the ocean to build a quiet, peaceful life on my own terms. To honor my father's memory, I established the General Richard Carter Foundation, providing legal defense and financial literacy resources for military families facing domestic and estate exploitation. My father spent his entire life protecting others, and in his final act, he taught me how to protect myself. Looking back, I realize that true strength isn't about avoiding the storm, it's about surviving it with your dignity intact. If you found yourself in my shoes, surrounded by people you trusted who turned out to be wolves, would you have played the long game like my father did? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.